So now that we've completed our bead post blowout, the next technique that we're going to demonstrate for you guys is the modified dash lift, utilizing both the cutters and the spreaders in order to perform this technique. The most important, or the first step in performing this is to remove this front fender so that we can expose all of our metal and we can see what we're actually working with. So by removing this front fender, now we've exposed up to the shock tower, we'll see where we have to make our relief cut. All right, so now that we've exposed our frame rail there, we have the ability to see where we're going to cut. We've got a couple gifts that the car gives us via these pre-existing holes in order to make our relief cut. The next thing we want to look at is on this A post where we're going to make our relief cut here in order to ultimately give us the ability to lift this dash. So here we've got the lumen hole. We could actually put our tool in there and we could actually cut through that lumen hole as well, having to cut less metal. So now we need to cut our relief cuts on both the A post as well as that front fender well behind that shock tower. This way we can maximize our lift. So now that we've made our two relief cuts, ultimately now we want to make another relief cut on the A post, actually cutting the A post, making sure that we're peeking and peeling, looking for any airbag canisters that may be hidden in this A post. Also leave yourself enough room just in case we have to ultimately go to a ram, we've got something to purchase on. Now our A post is cut, we can actually expand our relief cuts just a little bit more in both of these manners before we bring in the spreaders to ultimately lift the dash. Now our relief cuts are made, we're going to bring our spreaders in. The nice thing about using a modified dash lift is our spreaders are now out of the way as opposed to the ram being in the way of removing the victim. So now that we begin to push down on the frame rails of the car, we're actually starting to lift the car itself as opposed to the dash. But if we look at the A-post and where it started from where it ends, we've got a good 10 inches of lift on that dash, which is more than enough to remove the victim. If not, we can go ahead and reposition and start to lift again. The other nice thing about having this tool is that we have the ability for it to stabilize the vehicle and leave the tool in place while we remove the victim.
Welcome back. We're going to go ahead and do the other variation of a dash roll, which is using more the traditional methods, which is using hydraulic ram or a ram. So like the other video that you saw when we did the modified dash roll, we're just going to make the same relief cuts in the same area. We still want to take care of that A-pillar. We still want to take care of the structural skeleton and just behind the strut tower. We're going to still make a relief cut in the A-post, but we're going to modify and the process in which we actually get the lift. We're not going to use the spreader. We're going to use the hydraulic ram. Some food for thought. Anytime you push on a piece of metal, you got to kind of forecast where you're going to push that into. At some point, sometimes with this method, the rocker panel can actually get forced down into the ground. Take in consideration that. If you think that's going to happen, it's a good idea to go ahead and start putting some cribbing or another step chalk on where you plan on actually pushing that metal. Today, the process that we're going to use as a point for the base of the ram is going to be the hydraulic spreader. We're going to actually make a crimp and leave that spreader in place and use that to actually push as a push point. But some other possible uses or push points is taking the Halligan and taking the spike and driving it through the rocker panel and using the actual Halligan itself as a push point. You could also, if you have a long enough, like a two-stage hydraulic ram, you can use the B-pillar as a push point as well. So there's many different options. Whatever you decide to do, just make sure you forecast where you're going to push that metal. Now, when you guys do cut the A-post, pull and peek, pull and reveal, whatever, but look before you start cutting. We also want to cut further, a little bit higher up on the A-post to give us a little bit more leverage, so we have a little bit of more option on where we place that ram and how we get that roll. So typically we want to come up a little higher on the A-post. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and remove that front fender. It's just easier to go ahead and remove that fender and work with it off than it is on. Now at this point, we move the fender out of the way, but as you noticed in the video, the car actually moved. Anytime you have a movement in the vehicle, you always want to readdress the stabilization. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that that is stable, and we'll continue the evolution. Vehicle stable, evolution can continue. All right. As you can see in the video, sometimes you make a cut, the blades will actually start to spread. What we want to try to avoid is those blades coming across and fracturing that blade. Firefighter did a great job repositioning. Go ahead and continue on. Alright, so now we have the relief cut in the A-pillar and the front skeleton of the vehicle. We're going to go ahead and take out the A-pillar. Okay, now we have that in place. We're going to leave the spreader there, crimped position. We're going to use that as a push point. Now, some things to consider: where you place your push point for your spreader, how long your spreader is. We're going to go ahead and push up on the pinch weld. And there you got it, hydraulic ram dash lift.